Archaeology as a discipline is intrinsically connected to nationalistic ideas. To define the material history of humanity is to draw imaginary boundaries based on any number of shared traits. This means that there is an extreme responsibility on us as archaeologists to properly and transparently communicate the facts of how we conduct, analyze, and conclude research. We need to do this better in order to engage with the public about how cultural heritage has been misused by nationalist extremists to further the oppression of racialized groups. This video presents a brief history of archaeology's use as a tool of nationalist movements to weaponize cultural heritage for propaganda. Archaeology and material culture with it has been continuously weaponized by those in power to maintain their legitimacy. This is perhaps best understood through a discussion of archaeology in Nazi Germany, beginning with how the Nazis bought the archaeologists, then briefly outlining the propaganda they helped produce, before closing with an analysis of the long-term effects of almost 2 decades of research and materials lost to political corruption. The study of prehistory in early 20th century Germany was overshadowed by the classicists, who were awarded most of the funding and public acknowledgement at the time. The Nazi Party preyed upon the dissatisfaction of many prehistoric scholars, both with the state of their discipline and with their place in the world as Germans post-World War I and Treaty of Versailles. Gustav Cassina was a prehistoric archaeologist before and during the Nazi regime and accepted to be one of the leading prehistorians of his day. His main idea was that culture and ethnicity were linked, and that historical ethnic regions could be accurately determined through identification of culturally unifying artifacts. His ideas of cultural diffusion through strong, weak cultures interacting and one overcoming the other supported the fascistic conclusion of his findings that basically said, if strong cultures overtake weaker ones, and this culture that I've identified as the ancestors of Germany, strong, extends across the territory of other countries around Germany, then Germany must have a historic claim to those lands, and by archaeological and scientific law, a stronger culture than the people living there now. The Nazis created 8 new chairs in prehistory across museums in Germany in their first 2 years in power and greatly opened up funding for excavation and research in the field. They essentially bought the prehistoric academic space and began using it to turn propaganda, influenced by Cassina's ideas. Co-founded by Heinrich Himmler, the Ahnenerbe was an academic research institution controlled by the Schutzstaffel for the performance and publication of research that supported Hitler's ideas, which was then propagandized and widely distributed to the German public. The institution had 2 core theories explicitly related to archaeology. The first was Kulturkreis, which is the culture circles theory, and it supported the German invasion of foreign territory in the name of righting a historic wrong. If an artifact is said to be Germanic, then Germany has a claim to the land it came from. And the second explicit link was social diffusion theory, which was the idea mentioned earlier about strong cultures overcoming weaker ones during contact. This stuck around for a long time after the Third Reich. In fact, many archaeologists up until recently used some modified form of this theory. Now, however, considering many factors in the diffusion of technology, ideas, or materials has become the standard of practice. The impact of National Socialism on archaeology at the time was not really studied or understood beyond a basic assumption of power struggles between the SS Ahnenerbe and the Amt Rosenberg for dominance of either the prehistoric field or Rosenberg's pseudo-scientific theories about the Romans and the origins of Atlantis. It is really only beginning in the late 1900s and early 2000s with the work of the Prehistory and National Socialism Convention in 1998 that the impact of National Socialism on prehistory and prehistoric archaeology has been studied. This is because many academics who were part of the Ahnenerbe were never prosecuted or removed from their positions. They just adapted to the new political norms and obfuscated their fascism with complex theory. They stripped everything back to the foundation, but they forgot to inspect that foundation as well. Nazi academics such as Edmund Kiss, whose ideas about the origins of Atlantis directly influenced Graham Hancock, a modern pseudo-archaeologist with friends in high places. They were not jailed or even fired for their support of the National-Socialist Party. The fascist theories had been allowed to fester for so long that much of the discipline was tainted, and some remnants, such as diffusion theory, are still occasionally used today. After the Nazis, the most visible and prolific misuse of cultural heritage come from alt-right hate groups. Vanguard America, the Proud Boys, and Soldiers of Odin are all hate groups that steal culture to spread hate. An uneducated group of buffoons, these freakish fascists believe that medieval Europe was an ethnically pure haven, and that we should be closing our borders to migrants. The Soldiers of Odin are a hate group from Finland that have exported to the States and have actively praised Hitler. One of the hallmarks of fascism is a strong symbolic visual language to communicate ideas. The Nazis famously used and studied runes in connection with their Norse prehistoric archaeological interests. The right-wing co-option of runes has continued to the modern day, with the YBNP, or Hitler Youth as I like to call them, originally using the Othala rune, which was used as an insignia by the Race and Settlement Office of the SS, who themselves used two Sawillo runes as their sign. Do you know what this symbol is immediately? These are called fasces and originate from an ancient Roman symbol for power. The Nazis used this symbol, as does the American government. The Unite the Right rally in 2017 saw a plethora of lifted symbols from classical and medieval contexts being used to sow hate and fear. In fact, the man who drove his truck into a crowd of counter-protesters was seen carrying a shield with this insignia. Modern culture is inundated with references to the medieval era, with J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings setting the groundwork for a plethora of novels, movies, and TV that have been set in a medieval fantasy setting or are more explicitly set in the Middle Ages. The use of this setting in more recent history has indicated a potentially problematic pattern of racist sentiment justified as historical accuracy. The racist backlash against the Rings of Power series for casting non-white actors was, according to Brandon Morse, senior editor for far-right outlet Red State, because of how the series will check boxes and focus on diversity. Many are upset because it strays from their perception of Tolkien's original intent, although this ignores all the input from Christopher Tolkien before his death and Simon Tolkien's continued support for the project. The idea that medieval Europe was not diverse is inaccurate.
Who's that? Lincoln, I'd like you to meet a Jew. A Jew? Here? No, not.
And stems from the Nazi Volkisch movement. The ideas of romantic nationalism have carried through to the modern era through everything we have previously talked about and can still be strongly felt today. Archaeologists have continued to fail to root out hate and bigotry from their own discipline, and the flat-out false statements about the whiteness of medieval Europe are so easily countered with a little research. I'd like to finish this section with a quote. "I have in this war a burning private grudge, which would probably make me a better soldier at 49 than I was at 22, against that ruddy little ignoramus Adolf Hitler, ruining, perverting, misapplying, and making forever accursed that noble northern spirit, a supreme contribution to Europe, which I have ever loved and tried to present in its true light." J.R.R. Tolkien, A Letter to His Son Christopher, 1941. The War on Archaeology. The war on archaeology in the modern era has been waged through political manipulation of public attitudes towards academics to promote mistrust of anyone with ties to large research universities or institutions for public science communication. This has not been properly addressed through an increase in public messaging, wider access to published research, or a clear campaign about media literacy.
That's why it's good to think about what you're watching on TV and ask questions, kind of like you just did.
I would like to end this video with a blatant call to action. Critically analyze the media you consume, ask questions, and push back against bigotry. Do not become complacent just because someone is attempting to take advantage of your dissatisfaction with the world. To the archaeologists, use your platforms. You have all the education, knowledge, and resources to inform the public about misinformation as you see it. Please continue to do so. I would love to see more archaeologists sharing their interests online, as up to now, cultural heritage has been endlessly perverted under the auspices of the discipline, either because we were purchased or because we are inept. Fascists will continue to dominate historical spaces if we fail to push back. Protecting cultural heritage is more important now than ever.